Welcome to Akweya TV. Today we have a special edition. You're seeing here we're at the Center for Democracy and Development, the foremost organization working for democracy and development in West Africa and many parts of Africa. And the organization is a watershed organization in terms of how it operates. And at the same time, we are here because we're celebrating the founder of the organization, Dr. Kayode Fayemi, who you know in various capacities. And to have that conversation, we have here Dr. Dauda Garba, the director of the center. It's a pleasure to be here in this magnificent building. How are you doing?
Yeah, it's a good one, and thanks for at least visiting us today. I've been looking up to this visit because it's always a nice thing to go back to the organization where you worked, and for us, you have come home.
Exactly, it's home. For those who do not know, I was once a senior program officer here, and Dauda also was. How does it feel that you were once a program officer and now you're the director, you're the head of the center?
Yes, I've actually started out I was a program officer. I moved on to being senior program officer before I left in October 2008. Then 16 years later, I came back as the director. So
how does it feel?
Well, somehow, I've always said that the organization has transformed.
Yeah.
And I think what is important is that, yes, there could be some identity issues you will be struggling with in terms of, given the length of time you've left the place, as to whether the organizational culture is still there and all those things. But to a very large extent, CD is vibrant, and the ideas of the founding fathers are still present there.
Yeah.
And coming back to the organization, it becomes also my responsibility that even if there were maybe shifting grounds or those things, it's my responsibility to knock them into shape and get it to function the way it's supposed to be. So that dream of having a West Africa that flourishes in democracy is something that will continue to be the responsibility of the organization, and I would not personally see any person who leads the organization veering away from that.
Yeah, you are doing something spectacular today, which is naming a building, one of the buildings, after the founding director, Dr. Kayode Fayemi. Earlier, before that, this other building has been named after Dr. Tajuddin Abdurrahim, one of the founders who was a chairman of the International Governing Council. What's the role of this naming of structures and institutions, or structures after the founders in this reimagining of CDD that you're talking about?
Yes, I think that for those who are knowledgeable about the struggle for democracy and freedom in this region would obviously know but discuss the role of Center for Democracy and Development in that context. At some point in the history of Nigeria and also countries in the sub-region, immediately after independence, was the transition from democracy to authoritarian rule.
Yeah.
And in the entire 16 countries you have in the region, I guess maybe about 2 or 3 did not experience military rule.
Yeah.
So in that context, there have been a lot of struggle between, well, quote and unquote, those you consider as the radical citizens of the region or the progressive who have the idea that, or who share the idea that for government to be beneficial to the people, we have to build and nurture democracy. In that context, there had been this struggle by those fellows, and some got run out of the sub-region, based in the UK, in the US, and everything. And in the 1990s, early 1990s, or let me say precisely after the end of the Cold War, it was obvious that there was some sort of tumultuous situation in Africa generally, about states that were under one party rule and other ones that were under military rule needed to transit to democracy. So in that context, the founders of CDD, who also were exiles most of the time, sat down and talked about the need to, now that we are countries in the sub-region are returning to democracy, what is that thing that will establish, that will deepen that democracy in the continent, going back home to now, preach to the people and also ensure accountable leadership or democratic accountability. So in that context, Center for Democracy and Development was born. And it started also implementing its own program. A lot of the challenges in the continent were issues about conflicts. Of course, you know that in the Cold War time, the issues were largely external. So the transition to authoritarian rule brought also serious internal governance issues that even in some parts of the continent, there were clearly internal conflicts, like the ones you had in Liberia, the ones you had in Sierra Leone, the ones you have in Congo Democratic Republic, and several other parts of the continent. So CDD didn't have to look for job to do because some of the challenges were obvious, and it was only also clear that they threatened the existence of even West Africa. So they actually moved from doing just research into technical advisory, assisting organizations like the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, the African Union, who solely, for instance, ECOWAS was solely about economic
and I remember Nigeria's Oputa panel.
Exactly, and also the issue of transitional justice was a very high one, coming from South Africa to now looking at the experiences we've had in Liberia and Sierra Leone and all others. So they formed original ideas that CDD had to engage. And at the level of Oputa panel, Nigeria, CDD actually rendered a huge support because it was a completely new area of work that we CDD had earlier anticipated by way of getting somebody like Sonny Oyegbula, who actually eventually was the one who incorporated the Nigerian office or Nigerian version of CDD, because he started out in 1997 in the UK. So Sonny Oyegbula was actually someone who understudied the Truth and Reconciliation Commission work in South Africa. So by the time Oputa panel was set under the Obasanjo administration, CDD already had a huge experience with which he supported that Oputa panel work. And of course, if you have the privilege or the opportunity of reading that panel report, you see the acknowledgement in the report by Oputa panel that by Justice Chukwudifo Oputa recognizing the support of CDD in this direction. So ever since, CDD have done several other stuff, including with the African Union, the NEPAD, the issue of African government and people's governance on human rights, several other areas. Then you come to talk about the West African sub-region, where CD is almost a twin
ECOWAS.
brother or sister to ECOWAS. And within that context, beyond just supporting ECOWAS, it also went further to establish the West African Civil Society Forum. Also became also became a supporting body to the work of ECOWAS. So, so far so good. And if we also to look at the terrain, given the extent to which some organizations that actually fight against military rule in West Africa, including Nigeria, suddenly disappeared after them and could not reinvent themselves. You want to give it to CDD that it has survived the taste of time.
The likes of CLO were
absolutely. Now we are talking about 28 years of existence. So CDD has come a long way, and you'll see counting.
How would you situate the pivotal role that Kayode Fayemi played in that? We know he didn't walk alone, yes, but his leadership from 2007 into 2006 before he went into politics. What would you say?
1997, really.
1997 to 2006.
Yes.
How would you situate that in the entire achievements of CDD? Do you think it's really the character of his leadership, especially his background in civil military relations and all of that? Or do you just say it's because of the group, the collective?
Well, the fact is that there was a huge role played by a collective.
Yeah.
But you also want to recognize individual roles in what has happened in the life of CDD.
Yeah.
I think the first thing was that you had a collection of people who had a common dream about what their sub-region should look at.
Yeah.
And they had passion in rescuing that sub-region. And these also, among them were vibrant, progressive students who had their idea, who also spent time in relating with progressive political parties outside the sub-region too, for instance, the Democrat in the US or the Labour in the UK. And there were opportunities to rub minds. There were opportunities for citizens from the sub-region who were based in the UK, who had progressive ideas to also rub minds about what they needed to see in their own sub-region looking back home. I think that was the original idea. But again, you also needed people who are going to be the torch bearers in terms of carrying forth those ideas. Yeah, there are convening where these things will be, conversation will hold, but tasks and responsibilities were also assigned to some people. And people also look beyond what was just happening and also to say, my home, where I come from, the entire countries in the sub-region were under military regime. So if you needed the kind of democracy that flourished, you needed also to have to contend with those dictators who were in charge. So it's in this context that somebody like Kayode Fayemi became the arrowhead of some of those things and became the founding director of the team. But again, he also had somebody who complemented that role. Somebody like Tajuddin Abdurrahim, who was also the founding chair of the International Governing Council of the organization. And of course, the International Governing Council from day one had always been sub-regional in terms of those who constitute it. So at every time, the idea was about a West African that was going to witness a flourishing democracy that could deliver development to the people. So also recognizing this was the sharp, recognition that we needed to have people who were going to play the role of international advisory role to the organization. That when you see the names, then you'll be able to identify that these are not just boys that are doing their work.
Desmond
And of course, for all the people, they were in their 20s, 30s.
Yeah.
So we started looking out for people like Lord Avery, who had been a parliamentarian in Europe.
Yeah.
You started looking at people like Atahiru Jega, who also have made their mark in all these areas.
Yeah.
So it is against that backdrop that you want to say that CDD was a child that was well conceived, delivered, and nurtured to the kind of role he plays in the sub-region.
Yeah.
So beyond just having people of like minds, people who share a common dream and vision, you also needed people who had the passion for, who see the responsibility beyond job.
Yeah.
Because if you were to monetize it, I'm not sure it was about job. Even at the time I got into CDD, it wasn't about job. It was also not about the salary. It was about, you have this idea about delivering democracy in a continent. You have this about a region that you think should be the example to others. And you also find a platform for it. And that platform was also consolidated in research.
Yeah.
Very progressive research. And it's in that context that I see what they have done for the region. Yeah. And of course, we also know, even in trying what coalesced into this, there were experiences from the pro-democracy activism that accompanied that. And of course, that is where also is what do I call it now, a classic. It's classic called Out of the Shadows. Exiles and the Struggle for Freedom and Democracy in Nigeria. Yeah. If you've never read that book, I think it's a book I recommend to everybody.
It's not so available.
Reading the book.
It's not so available. Will CDD make it available?
I'm aware that there was a second version of it, which was again published. And reading the book, I was familiar with some of the things that were discussed because I had one singular opportunity of working with Chief Anthony Enahoro as a political officer when he also returned from exile to the country. Yeah. And some of the exchanges we've had and all those things, I realized were also already documented in that book. So for me, it was an opportunity to reconcile those things and also establish the authenticity of what is contained in that book. For instance, I mean the struggle for Nadeko, and see how people risked their life, including having to fly from the UK to bring Radio Nadeko equipment to Nigeria. Yeah. And the Radio Nadeko eventually, as we know it, became also re-Christian Radio Kudirat to Nigeria. Risking your life for a project and thinking that you were getting into a plane that was going to be taking you to a neighboring country like Togo, and only to come and meet yourself in Nigeria on the plane. It's like you were being delivered to your enemies. Yeah. And how he was able to survive that is something that anytime I think of it today, I ask myself, God must be somewhere trying to protect our country and also helping to build the democracy that most people are enjoying today. Yeah. And we also need, as a group, to jealously guide it.
Very true. We'll go on a short break and then return, and then we'll talk more about Dr. Kayode Fayemi's mentorship as, and his role in the Nigerian civil society space, then how he transited into partisan politics and what's the scorecard like? We're having this conversation with Dr. Dauda Garba, the director of the Center for Democracy and Development, who has entered the shoes of his mentor, Dr. Kayode Fayemi. We'll be right back.
In a world filled with impactful stories and transformative experiences, the essence of change is vital. That's where we come in. With over 16 years of experience shooting documentaries, we specialize in productions for local and international non-governmental organizations. Our focus is on showcasing the results and impacts of non-profit intervention on individuals, institutions, and society. We capture the success stories that emerge from these interventions, allowing project management experts to focus on designing projects with the greatest value to the beneficiaries. Our skilled team of filmmakers, storytellers, and technicians serve as a powerful tool, raising awareness, fostering empathy, and mobilizing support for the cause that truly matters. If you are a non-governmental organization looking to amplify your impact through compelling storytelling, let us bring your success story to life, ensuring that the world hear the voices that deserves to be heard.
Connect with us by sending an email to info@isumedia.net.ng for more interesting updates. Follow us on our social media platforms @ISUmedia. Isu Media, ocean of ideas.
Okay, welcome back. Thank you so much. For those of you watching on YouTube, please share this video because it's going to get more interesting now. We want to talk really why this building is being named after Dr. Kayode Fayemi. He has been a mentor to so many in the Nigerian civil society space before he transited to becoming a politician, two-time governor of Ekiti State, minister of solid minerals, and so many things. So I want to talk to Dr. Dauda Garba about that. How do you see his mentorship role in this? First of all, as a staff of the CDD, well, I mean, you as a staff of the CDD, how was it like working with him?
Well, I think to start with, Dr. Kayode Fayemi is the most fascinated person I have ever worked with. If we were to count at the tip of my fingers those I have worked with, you're certainly going to find him as number one. That really, really impacted on my life. And I also want to say that the interview that brought me to CDD was one of the toughest I've had. And I also saw that in my second coming as the director, also one of the toughest.
Whoa.
And the simple way I've described this is that interview held in an AC room.
Okay.
And I came out of that interview sweating. And it was also very obvious that as a program officer, what was needed was somebody who can work with little supervision. And in that case, by the nature of what it means to head an organization of CDD, you're going to have somebody who is always traveling and never have the time to sit down. So if you needed somebody to hold your feet down to walk, you are not going to find that. So you're going to learn to work with less supervision. And I saw that when I came into CDD. And you're going to relate with people at high level or high profile people. And knowing that as a program officer, you have to put on copy for all the communication that are getting off the organization. And you begin to see that as you have those exchanges, you'll be wondering whether is my Oga following up on these things because he's not responding. There are times I will walk to him because we fondly call him Dr. K, Dr. K. That's what we all call him. I'll ask Dr. K, all this, I'm having exchanges with people. I'm not seeing you. You are not responding. You are not. You say, Dauda, when we give people responsibility, we allow them to run with it. And that was it. And he said, you see, you are doing well. I'm also, if you are not doing well, you see me intervene. And the first assurance about that was that at 6 months of service in the organization, you are issued a form like, okay, you've reached the end of the probation. Can we assess what you have done? And they issue you that form. I responded several things that I have done within 6 months. And I remember joining that conversation with Dr. Kayode Fayemi and our head of finance and admin then, and Mr. Fumi Alaka. We sat down and he just told me, Dauda, I have taken a review. We've all read this, your responses to this. And I must, first of all, we are just fulfilling all righteousness by way of bringing you down here to have this conversation, because what you have done in the last 6 months are evidence. And that gave me some level of comfort. And to date, I still have that, that documentation in one of my files. And we then look forward to now engaging some of the issues. And the other bit is that Dr. Kayode Fayemi was also taught me the need to allow people to grow. He was particularly interested in human capital development. That when he saw opportunity from anywhere, he was always going to push for CDD to go and learn new things. And that is also what you find in how he got somebody like Sonny Oyegbula to go and understudy the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa, which eventually became what helped the Nigerian Oputapane Commission. So that opportunity, and when he is doing this, his humility to that is something you can also not take away from him. We'll get to a place and introduce you as a colleague. No matter how junior you are in the organization, he introduces you as his colleague in the organization. And for those who were my contemporaries in CDD, somebody like Johnny Kubaje, who is now working in the African Union, somebody like Mohammed Ibrahim, who now works at the level of ECOWAS. These are guys who were together in somebody like Ayodele Amin. These are guys who were together in CDD when they went for their master's program in the UK and came back. So in other words, he believes in human capacity development for the staff in CDD. And for me, I've also taken that very seriously. And just yesterday, I also have the opportunity of also mentioning it. Anybody in the organization who is interested in developing himself, I will never for any reason close the opportunities. As a staff of CDD, a conference is happening, a call for paper. Call for papers are issued, I will apply, I send in an abstract. If I have the opportunity of going, I send in a letter to say, I need X number of days because I want to attend this kind of conference. It is through such systems that I was able to launch myself into the African Studies Association that have taken me to conferences in Honolulu in the US. Through such systems, I've also been able to get into the Geneva Institute of International Affairs as a fellow. Through such institutes, I've been able to participate in international conferences like International Political Science Association, IPSA. So these were grants through which I had the opportunity of developing myself. And the work CDD was doing on its own also enabled me to engage with eggheads in the political science field and history in this country. So today, you might see most publications where you see me publishing with people like Adele Jinadu, publishing with people, Professor Adele Jinadu, publishing with people like Professor Jibril Ibrahim, publishing with people like Professor Sam Egu, Professor Okei Biano, and those were the opportunities that Kayode Fayemi's provided us, mentorship provided us in this field. I remember also in those days, I'll travel as far as Ayimba to go and meet Professor Samegu, developing concepts and all those things that are going to help. So for me, there was a process through which they developed us, and we also absorbed that opportunity. And today, perhaps all that combined is what may have brought me to the organization. So there's so much to tell about the whole story about Kayode Fayemi. And I also know the time he was leaving the organization. And for me, the best way to know if an organization is well routinized is for the progress of that organization when the what do I call it? The founder figure or the has left the place. And ever since, the organization has waxed stronger. And like I said, if we were to compare CDD with several other organizations that were their contemporaries, you still want to say that, yes, the organization is still waxing stronger. And even some of those organizations are largely Nigeria-based organizations, but this is still a West African organization. It's still waxing stronger. It's still learning getting all the opportunities that are available. And in that context, that I must say that Kayode Fayemi, like the CDD, he was the founding director, has become an institution.
And then he went into politics. Did he leave CDD in 2006 to go into politics, or did it happen accidentally? Like, okay, my tour of duty is finished here, and because you look at the situation now, he's one of the few who were in the pro-democracy activism that went to play the active role in the democratic process as players themselves. Was it a deliberate thing that I'm leaving CDD to go into partisan politics, or how did that happen?
Well, I wish he's the person that is telling this story himself, but I know he left CDD in January, the end of January 2006. And I didn't see any transition. I mean, like a long transition between them. And I also know then it has also become an idea that civil society who have been in the wing, then they were also beginning to also complain about, this doesn't seem to look like what we fought for in terms of this thing. So across the board, you also saw some civil society guys who were also interested
Abdul Oro
in politics. Abdul Oro, like you mentioned, is one of them. So I guess that there were also this conversation that we needed to do much better. And if we are not getting the result of what we fought for, can we also begin to say, let's venture into politics and see how we can demonstrate the practice. And for me, Kayode Fayemi effectively demonstrated that. And I have reasons for this. In the history of Nigeria, we didn't have the practice of somebody paying social, what do you call it? Social welfare money to people. He did it, and people thought it was impossible. He did it, and in some other instances, be private to him, telling the story about how older women in Ekiti will come and say, thank you for this. And people say, what was 5,000 naira that he was giving to people? And he testified, he talked about the testimony of older people who were saying, I don't even finish that amount of money before another one comes again at the end of the month. He said it. And no matter how small it is, at least he was able to demonstrate that it is possible. Then there was also the bit that as a development sector practitioner, I observed when Kayode Fayemi was the governor in Ekiti State, most of the development partners were really interested in going to Ekiti State and work there because they had somebody who had an idea of what development work is about, who had the opportunity of providing them with the environment or the space to work. So Ekiti became the reigning state in terms of access to, how do I call it? To invest your money and you are sure of getting results. And he also had quite a lot of development sector persons that were playing better in-person role in the government or behind the scene role as well. So in that context that he was able to attract attention to Ekiti and also attract development to that area. And for those who at least know that place very, very well, because I had my NYSC in the old Ondo state.
Yeah.
And the bit of that state where I served is now today Ekiti state. And that I'm talking in particular Oye Ekiti.
Okay.
And I had my orientation in F1LIA. Okay. So this is Ekiti land. And those who understand Ekiti very well will tell you that it's largely an agrarian state.
Yeah.
And for the effort that was put in by Kayode Fayemi, and I also had colleagues who also followed him to Ekiti to ensure that some of these ideas were also well planted.
Yeah.
And even after his government, the succeeding governor also, his successor also found it deemed to retain some of the people. And I'm sure in a situation where you find quarrels between governors and their successors, you are not seeing that in Ekiti, which is also an indication that there was a blend of what the project that was going to be in Ekiti. And for me, it's working and the state is functioning. In that context, I think that when he became minister, I've already left CDD to found the Nigeria office of Revenue Watch Institute, or if you like, Natural Resource Governance Institute. And he called me to say, well, I've been appointed the Minister of Solid Mineral Development, and we have to think around some of the policy and other issues. We had a length of conversation sitting down in his house in Maitama, where he was staying. And we had a length of conversation also, like mentioning names of those I think that he could also want to interact with. And the work he did there is also very, he actually did the roadmap for the growth and development of the solid mineral sector. And if you take a look at that work, and I also pointed him to Professor Ibrahim Garuba, the former Vice Chancellor of Ahmadu Bello University, which also he acknowledged that somebody has also mentioned the name to him before. We're working with such eggheads and people with experience in geology and all those things. He did that work, that roadmap, that if you take a look at it, if only we were to implement that particular, what is contained in that roadmap, Nigeria should be, by now, a destination for the mining sector. Wow. So these are some. So there is footprint in everywhere he has been. They are obvious for people to see, and the progress that we have registered in that sector today is also largely based on the foundation he laid at that level. So for me, it's very different from what we know about some of the political class in Nigeria, whose duty is about you were appointed to go and chop.
I remember the expression.
He's a worker. He rolled his sleeves every time that you had to saddle him with a responsibility.
I remember the expression stomach infrastructure, which Ayo Fayose actually used in reference to Kayode Fayemi's infrastructural.
Of course, those you can't theoretically interrogate that issue of stomach infrastructure today without actually making reference to those things. The 5,000 and the stomach infrastructure, which one was it? And of course, it's some kind of stuff that is just what we revisited 2 weeks ago about votes and the mills. Are you rather go to cast your vote for the mills, or you are going to cast your vote for development? And for me, that conference was really grounded on strengthening democracy in Nigeria. And people like Kayode Fayemi were there from the beginning to the end, a 2-day conference. And of course, we all know that there are people who, by virtue of their profile and also by virtue of their involvement with politics, they don't even have time to sit down have a conversation. What happens is that the moment you are done with the opening ceremony, they go.
Yeah.
But sitting down to be part of a process that lasted for a whole 2 days was something for me, that conference was something to reckon with.
Okay, that's already taking us into part 2 of the conversation. So for those of you who are stopping here, we've been having a conversation with the director of the Center for Democracy and Development. And in our next conversation, we are going to go into this programming of the Center for Democracy and Development. What are the current issues? Things are happening in the Sahel, in West Africa, and different parts of the world. We will be discussing that in the part 2 of this conversation. Thank you for being with us. Please share this video and keep a date as we come up with the next one shortly.